It was interesting that 1984 was such a seminal year for us. Think about the book, 1984. But 1984 was when we organized realistic living. It's when we discovered bioregionalism, which made ecologists of us. We turned out to be the first Continental Bioregional Congress, and went to all of them thereafter until this past year, and became organizers of bioregionalism continental-wide. Well, actually down into Mexico, we made lots of trips to Mexico, and in the Texas area, we organized bioregionalism in Texas. So that was a lot of our missional stuff went there. We also ran into RC, the Reevaluation Co-Counseling Movement, in 1984, and we were very much involved in that, and we still have men's and women's groups to do a peer counseling monthly in our houses here. And so that has just remained a part. Out of all the psychology we ran across, that seemed to be one of the best. It was good, solid understanding of psychology, and it wasn't going to a counselor you paid. You learned the methods and you traded off. And so we've kept that as part of our practice. We ran into Eco Theater. We met Marriott Lee, who was the founder of Eco Theater, and I studied with her until she died, and became one of the leaders in that movement and one of the playwright directors. And we've continued doing that, which is taking stories from your own community and making them into drama in a way that's... Marriott Lee studied with Paul Tillich, actually, it turned out, and she also worked for Margaret Mead. So it was just an amazing, deep person. And Eco Theater has an element of being and presence in it that it's unlike the theater you usually see where you're acting. In Eco Theater, you're really being. It has a contemplative aspect to it and a very down-to-earth quality. And our mission has been these house church. It's not like we're as much, or I don't experience myself as much out protesting and blah, blah kind of group as the CRC to me is missional, and doing Eco Theater, a new kind of presence in theater, and bioregionalism, new relationship to the earth. That's been more the nature.
Joyce has been genius in leading us into new spiritual realms or something. She has kind of a nose for this, and some of the things she's already mentioned. But we also, she pulled us into Buddhism. And Buddhism is making a fabulous contribution to the culture of North America right now, bringing a kind of existentialism and a kind of focus on interior inquiry through meditation practices that has been neglected in the church and in the culture at large, and giving us a way of even talking about inquiry. Another great influence that for some reason we got into, I can't remember where we first met, A.H. Almaas.
Eugene.
Oh, we met him through the Buddhists, didn't we? At any rate, one of Joyce's Buddhist teachers introduced us to the A.H. Almaas's heritage, which is, he is a Sufi by upbringing.
It's a diamond approach.
And he's a psychologist but he's a psychologist who is a psychologist of religion, basically, or a psychologist of the spiritual dimension, and has therefore pulled together what Buddhism and ancient Sufi mysticism, Christian mysticism, Jewish mysticism, all these various things were about, and systematized this in relationship to the best of psychology, and have put together conferences and programs. Well, we got into those and did those programs. So what I'm trying to say is, realistic living became a research device for Joyce and I going into some of the best spiritual inquiry programs in the country, and then pulling those back together and doing so in the context that we were already in, the RS1 context, the recovery of Christianity context. What we discovered about religion in that process is that religion is just a practice. It's just a practice like toiletry or gardening, but it's a practice that has the intent of accessing your essence as a human being, or your spirit as a spirit being in relationship to final reality. And this is what every religion has actually been at its best. Of course, religion perverts, like economics perverts, and education perverts, every other social process perverts. But religion at its best is just a social process, like any other social process, with the intent of accessing that which is beyond all social processes, this infinite reality that everybody's up against. And this conversation with Buddhism has made this very vivid, because Buddhism is a different approach, a clearly different approach than Christianity and Judaism. And yet you can see where these overlap. It just gives you a gap in which to see that, well, I could be a Buddhist, or I could be a Christian, or I could try to be a Jew or a Hindu. But I know Christianity real well, and there are this, and this, and this, and this about Christianity that's been very effective in my life. So why not take all this spiritual insight and pour it back into updating the Christian practice, so that it does for human beings the kind of thing it obviously did do in its first centuries, and occasionally, and again throughout the history of the Western world. Also, another thing that motivated us to think for going that direction was realization that most people are more installed into Christianity than they even know. People who think they're atheists and secular people are nevertheless profoundly influenced by the Judeo-Christian mix of stuff. And people who are Christians in shallow ways still have in their bones these stories and these memories and these, and probably, especially in North America and South America, these cultures are never going to live again in their most creative potentiality unless we enable a Catholic and Protestant deposit to be re-enlivened. So the mission of re-enlivening the Christian practice seems a very relevant one for me, because it works for me as a practice, and because it's needed, and because I might as well live in Christianity as in somewhere else. And I probably am more capable of living there than in some other religion.
Now, my experience of it was that there was a period, I did 10 years of lots of retreats from 3 days to 30 days. And there was a period when I thought, well, maybe I want to be a Buddhist instead of a Christian. But then there was a period when I began to see how very Christian I was, and it's like getting really into Buddhism made me aware of that. And it deepened my Christianity. I think that interreligious dialogue, rather than being confusing, is really deepening. That's how I experienced it. And you do discover how your Christianity is so embedded. In the order we used to say, you've got these little, pegs or something of dynamite, and they can just easily explode. It's like you just carry that from the culture. The other thing I want to say was that, the experimentation. We have really just made ourselves like experimental animals. Rather than doing research with books, we do read a lot, but we have put ourselves out there and sat at the feet of a lot of teachers and practiced a lot of practices. And the latest we're doing, Alan wanted to do the Ignatian retreat. And asked me to be his spirit guide to do that. And so for this, since May, and we'll be going down into June, he does 3 times a day these practices, the Ignatian, which are, if you remember the Luke conversations, do you remember the old Luke conversation where you read the scripture and then you put yourself in the scene and you describe the scene and you experience it? It's a lot of that. You just go through the New Testament and you live and put yourself in every part of it and have conversations and journal and talk with the characters in the scene. You have colloquies with Mary and with Jesus and with God. And what I've been doing as his director, I've been doing it once a day. I go through the same things, and then we meet together several times a week. So that's, for me, been our latest experiment. and research, and it's just a wondrous experience. And what we want to do, it's really kind of hard to follow. The books that we found out are pretty complicated, so what we want to do is do it for our own experience and benefit, and then put together a program that other people can follow. So that's what we tend to do. You know, we try something out and then we put it in a form that we can teach it and use it with other people.